The stars burned cold in the black of space. Among them drifted a ship, small and battered, engines coughing sparks like a dying beast. Inside, alarms screamed. Panels flickered. A voice shouted in panic, "Mayday! Mayday! This is Commander Vrask of the Vethan Guard. Engines are failing. Gravity well detected. I'm being pulled into the Forbidden Zone. Into the Deathworld." His words trembled, though Vrask was no coward. He had fought in wars, faced fleets and commanded thousands. But this was different. The cursed world ahead was not like any enemy. It had no army, no cities, no weapons, and yet it was feared more than any empire. The ship jolted as its hull cracked. Flames licked the sides as atmosphere swallowed the vessel. Vrask's claws scraped the console. His mandibles clicked with desperation. He shouted one last warning into the recorder, "No one survives a death world. No one." The ship tore through storms of red lightning, crashing into a jungle darker than night. The ground shook. Creatures fled. Then silence. Hours later, the recorder still blinked red. The commander crawled out of the wreckage. His armor was broken, his weapons gone. He stumbled through twisted trees that hissed with venom. The air burned his lungs, the soil melted his boots. He gasped, each step weaker than the last. "This place is alive," he whispered. Something moved in the shadows. Not a beast, not a machine. A figure, human. She stepped from the firestorm like a ghost of iron, skin pale beneath streaks of ash, eyes sharp and calm. She carried no weapon, yet the jungle seemed to bow away from her path. The commander stared in disbelief. A human here? His voice cracked with both fear and awe. She looked at him with quiet pity. "You shouldn't have come," she said. Then darkness swallowed him. His final recording, his final warning, would travel the galaxy. And it would carry a name that all would soon fear. The Deathworld had a human. In the years before Vrask's crash, the Deathworld was already spoken of in hushed voices. Spacefarers told stories in dark cantinas. Merchants whispered warnings to new captains. Children of alien races grew up hearing its name as a curse. The planet had no official title. On maps, it was only a number, a set of coordinates surrounded by warning signs. To the galaxy, it was simply the Deathworld. Every expedition sent there had ended in silence. Scientists had tried. Soldiers had tried. Machines had tried. None came back. Some signals returned for hours, maybe days, filled with screams and static. Then nothing. Why was it so deadly? No one could agree. Some said the air carried poison. Others swore the ground itself ate ships whole. A few believed the world was cursed, a prison left by some ancient race, but one fact never changed. No living thing from outside survived it. Until now, when Commander Vrask's recorder was recovered by a patrol ship weeks later, it spread faster than wildfire. Every corner of the galaxy played his last words, his voice shaking. His confession, his disbelief. No one survives a death world. No one. But I saw her. A human. Walking in fire. She should be dead. She is not dead. She lives. The broadcast ended with silence, broken only by static. That silence was worse than any scream. Alien councils gathered in panic. War leaders pounded their tables. Scholars argued until their voices broke. "A human cannot live there," cried one counselor. "Then how do you explain the recording?" Another answered. "It is a trick. A lie. Or worse," whispered a general. "It is true. If it was true, it changed everything. The galaxy already knew humanity's reputation. Though few in number, humans had proven impossible to conquer. Their colonies resisted where others surrendered. Their soldiers fought where others broke. Their bodies healed from wounds that killed others. Humans were not the strongest, nor the fastest, nor the smartest. But they endured. And if one human could not only survive but thrive on a death world, then what did that mean for the future? Whispers spread. If she commands the planet, she commands a weapon no empire can match. What if she leaves? What if she brings the death world with her? She must be destroyed. Fear turned into obsession. On the planet's surface, the woman moved through the jungle as if it were her own skin. She was lean, scarred, dressed in scraps of cloth hardened by time. Her hands were calloused, her eyes sharp like predators that stalked the night. She drank water from pools that could melt metal. She ate fruit that killed beasts twice her size. She walked barefoot across ground that blistered alien flesh. The Deathworld did not fight her. It bent to her. Birds with blades for wings circled but never struck. Trees with venomous thorns shifted their branches aside. Even the storms seemed to roll back when she raised her hand to the sky. To others, the Deathworld was death. To her, it was home, but she had not always belonged here. Years before, she too had fallen from the stars. Not by choice. She had been a prisoner, condemned by alien rulers. Her transport ship had been sabotaged, dragged into the Deathworld's pull. Guards and prisoners alike perished in fire. She alone crawled from the wreck. Broken, starving, half-mad with pain. For weeks she stumbled, hunted by beasts, poisoned by air, torn by storms. Each night she thought she would die. Each morning she woke, still alive. Slowly she learned. Which fruits healed, which pools gave strength, which storms warned before they struck. The Deathworld was not her enemy. It was her teacher, and she became its only student. Now, with Vrask's recording spreading, fleets prepared. The empires could not ignore her. If they let her live, her legend would grow. Others might follow her. Humans might flock to her. And then the galaxy would face not one, but an army of Deathworld survivors. The first plans were made in secret, assassins, scouts, probes. But the galaxy's mistake was believing she was a victim to be hunted. She was not the prey. She was the warning. The sky burned one night with falling stars. Not stars at all, but alien dropships piercing the atmosphere. Soldiers in heavy armor stepped onto the ground, their boots sinking into soil that hissed like acid. They carried rifles, blades, explosives. They had studied maps, read reports, memorized survival manuals. They were ready, or so they thought. Minutes after landing, one soldier screamed. Roots coiled around his legs, pulling him under. Another fired his rifle, but the recoil startled a flock of winged predators. They fell on him in a storm of claws. The rest tried to form ranks, but the jungle moved like a living army. Trees bent, rocks split, poison mist rolled across the ground. The soldiers fired into the shadows, blind and desperate. Then they saw her. She stood on a ridge, silent, watching. The soldiers raised their weapons. But before they could fire, the jungle itself struck. One by one they fell. When the last soldier lay gasping, helmet cracked, he turned his eyes toward her. "Why?" he choked. "Why are you still alive?" She did not answer. She only turned, vanishing into the shadows. Her silence was worse than any words. On distant worlds, in hidden chambers, the recording played again and again. Commanders studied her face, zooming on the grainy footage. Scholars tried to read her lips, desperate for clues, but no one knew her name. No one knew her reason. Only one thing was certain. The Deathworld had a human, and the galaxy would never be the same. In the dark of the jungle, she crouched by a pool, watching ripples spread from her touch. Her eyes lifted to the stars. Somewhere up there they were watching her. Somewhere up there they were planning to come. She smiled. "Let them come," she whispered. The jungle stirred, alive, as if answering her call. The council chamber shook with voices. Alien leaders shouted over one another, their words sharp, their faces twisted in disbelief. At the center of the vast hall, a holoscreen flickered with the final moments of Commander Vrask's recorder. The grainy image showed fire, storm, and shadow. Then her figure appeared, calm, human, alive. She walked through the burning wreckage as if it were a field of grass. The recording ended with static. For a moment, the entire chamber was silent. Then a warlord slammed his claws against the table. "This is impossible. No human could live there," a scholar hissed back. "And yet we see her. If this is real, then she is the most dangerous being in the galaxy." Another voice, trembling, spoke from the shadows. She should not exist. The council broke into chaos. Some demanded proof. Others demanded immediate action. And one general, scarred from wars long past, leaned forward with a grim face. "I have fought humans before," he said. "You cannot measure them by logic or science. They endure where none should. If one has made the Deathworld her home, then we must act now. Before she acts against us." The words froze the chamber. Every leader knew what it meant. If humanity had claimed the Deathworld, the balance of power across the stars was broken. On the Deathworld, the woman walked along the edge of a canyon where fire raged in its depths. She moved without fear, her steps sure. To her, the flames were nothing but warmth, a warning to be respected but not feared. Once she had a name, a family, a world of her own. But years of storms and scars had taken those memories. Now she was only what the Deathworld had shaped her into. She hunted when hungry. She built when storms broke her shelter. She healed herself with roots and waters that killed outsiders. To the galaxy, she was a phantom, a human who should not exist. But to the Deathworld, she was its child. Back in the Galactic Council, arguments raged for hours. Some demanded to send more armies. Some wanted to erase the entire planet with fire from orbit, bomb it until nothing lives, one shouted, and risk the wrath of a world we do not understand. Another countered. "She is only one human," someone sneered. "Then why did Vrask's entire squad fall before her?" The scarred general growled. Finally, the council leader raised her hand. The chamber grew silent. "We will not destroy the planet yet," she declared. "We must first know if the stories are true. We will send hunters, the best of the best. If they kill her, the danger ends. If they fail, we will burn the world." Every alien present agreed, but none noticed the fear in their own voices. Across the galaxy, the call went out. Elite soldiers, assassins, mercenaries, all promised wealth, power, or freedom if they brought back the head of the human survivor. Some laughed. One human alone against them? Too easy. Others remembered the stories. They sharpened their blades, polished their rifles, and prayed. Ships set course for the forbidden coordinates. The Deathworld waited. The woman sat on a ridge overlooking the jungle below. The sun burned red, casting shadows like blood. She tilted her head. The air shifted. The ground trembled. Something was coming. She did not know when. She did not know how many. But she knew the galaxy would not leave her in peace. Her eyes narrowed. She placed her hand on the soil. The earth pulsed back like a heartbeat. "I am ready," she whispered. The jungle stirred. Creatures growled. Branches bent. The Deathworld itself seemed to answer. The first ship pierced the skies with fire. Then another. Then another. Dozens of dropships fell through clouds, thick with poison. When their ramps opened, hunters stepped out. Reptilian assassins cloaked in shadow. Insectoid soldiers with blades for arms. Hulking brutes carrying cannons. They spread across the jungle, confident, trained, armed with technology meant to conquer worlds. But the Deathworld was no ordinary world. Within minutes, screams echoed through the trees. One assassin vanished into a pool that boiled like acid. Another brute fired his cannon, only for the recoil to shake loose a swarm of winged predators that tore him apart. The jungle itself moved. Roots coiled. Rocks shifted. Mist swallowed entire squads. The survivors gathered, their confidence cracked. Then they saw her. She stood in the clearing, hair tangled by the wind, eyes unblinking. No armor, no weapon. Only her. The hunters raised their rifles. "Target acquired," one hissed. They fired, but before the bullets reached her, the ground split. The earth swallowed the shots in a burst of dust and rock. The hunters cursed, adjusting aim. She did not move. She only raised her hand. The jungle moved with her. Branches snapped. Vines lashed. A storm of blades and roots tore through the hunters. They fell, one after another, screaming, their weapons useless against a living world. Those who lived fled into the shadows, but they would carry her image back to their masters. The woman who should not exist. When the last hunter died, the woman stood alone in the clearing. She looked at the corpses, at the weapons now rusting in the soil. She could have taken their technology. She could have used their ships, but she did not. Instead, she turned back to the jungle. The Deathworld had given her all she needed. News of the massacre spread fast. Not one hunter had succeeded. The council gathered once more. The chamber was filled with fear. "Impossible," one leader gasped. Dozens of elites armed with the best technology. Dead within hours. She is not human, another snarled. No, the scarred general said. She is human. That is what makes this worse. The leader rose again, her voice sharp as a blade. We will not send hunters. We will send armies. Burn her world and burn her with it. But deep in her eyes, even she did not believe it would be so simple. On the Deathworld, the woman built a fire. Sparks rose into the night. She watched them vanish into the sky. She knew more would come, stronger, greater, but she was ready. Her hand pressed against the soil, and the jungle pulsed with life around her. The storms rolled in the distance, lightning striking in patterns that matched her heartbeat. They think I should not exist, she whispered to the night. Then let me show them why I do. The Deathworld roared in answer. The jungle floor trembled as alien dropships touched down. Their engines roared, kicking up clouds of black dust. Ramps slammed open, and squads of armored soldiers marched into the shadows. They carried rifles that could pierce tanks. Their armor was layered with shields that deflected plasma. They were the best warriors the galaxy could offer. Their commander raised his voice. Remember your orders. The human must die. Do not underestimate her. This is no simple planet. This is the Deathworld. The soldiers laughed nervously, trying to bury their fear. To them, the jungle was silent, almost welcoming. The trees swayed gently, and the air seemed calm. But within minutes the Deathworld struck. A scout screamed as roots shot from the ground, wrapping around his legs and dragging him under. A second fired wildly, hitting nothing, as mist rolled across the field. Shapes moved inside the fog, eyes glowing. When the mist cleared, the soldier was gone. The commander shouted for order, but then the jungle itself erupted. Vines snapped like whips. Trees groaned as if alive. Predators poured from the shadows, claws and teeth flashing. Blades scraped against armor. Shields failed. Soldiers screamed, and above it all, unseen, the woman watched. She crouched high on a ridge of black stone, her body still, her eyes sharp. Below, the alien soldiers fought for their lives, trapped in chaos they could not understand. She had no rifle, no armor, only her knowledge of the world. Every step the soldiers took she had taken years before. Every mistake they made, she had made and survived. The jungle was her weapon now, and it obeyed her. As the commander shouted orders, she whispered into the wind. The storm answered, rolling across the sky. Red lightning flashed, striking the earth with violent cracks. The soldiers looked up in terror. "Storm incoming!" one yelled.
"Shields up!"
Another cried, but the shields only made them targets. Lightning tore them apart one by one. The alien commander, a tall reptilian with silver armor, stood his ground. He raised his blade high and roared to his soldiers, "Hold formation! Do not let her break us!" But already half his men were gone. The jungle devoured them faster than he could command. Then he saw her. On the ridge, framed by fire and storm, stood the human. Her hair blew in the wind. Her eyes glowed with cold defiance. The commander pointed his blade. "There, kill her!" The soldiers turned, rifles raised. But before they could fire, the ground between them split open. Lava burst from the earth, swallowing 2 whole squads. She never moved. She only watched. High above, in orbit, alien commanders observed through drones. The battle streamed into council chambers across the stars. They saw their soldiers, trained and armed with the best weapons, torn apart in minutes. They saw the humans standing untouched, as if the Deathworld itself shielded her. One counselor whispered, "She does not survive." "She commands." The scarred general slammed his fist down. "This is no myth. This is war." Hours later, the battle had ended. Smoke curled through the trees. Bodies lay scattered, weapons melted into the soil, but a few soldiers still lived. Their armor cracked, their faces scarred. They stumbled deeper into the jungle, trying to escape. They whispered among themselves, "She is no human. She is the planet. We cannot win." One soldier, his voice trembling, clutched his recorder. "We must warn them. The human is not trapped here. She rules here." But even as he spoke, shadows shifted. The jungle growled. They never left the planet alive. When silence returned, the woman descended from her ridge. She walked among the corpses of the fallen. Her eyes lingered on their weapons. She picked up a rifle, weighed it in her hand, then dropped it. She had no need for alien technology. She knelt by a soldier still breathing, barely alive. His helmet was shattered, his eyes wide with fear. "Why?" he gasped. "Why does this world obey you?" She did not answer. She only looked at him, her silence more terrible than words. Then she stood and walked away. The jungle swallowed him moments later. Across the galaxy, fear spread like fire. Fleets had been lost. Hunters had been slaughtered. Armies had been erased. The alien council gathered once again, their voices trembling. She destroyed them in hours. She controls storms, earth, beasts. She is no longer human. The scarred general rose. His voice was heavy with certainty. She is human. That is why she is dangerous. Humans learn. Humans adapt. And she has adapted to the most deadly world in existence. If she leaves, none of us will stop her. The chamber fell silent. Every leader knew he was right. Back on the Deathworld, the woman sat in a cave carved into the cliffs. A fire flickered at her feet. Shadows danced across the walls. She closed her eyes, remembering pieces of a past long buried. A ship, chains, alien guards who had mocked her. The crash, the screams of those who died. She had been abandoned here to die. But instead, she had been reborn. Her voice, low and steady, filled the cave. "You thought this was my grave. Instead it became my crown," thunder rumbled. The ground quaked. Outside, trees shifted as if listening. The Deathworld pulsed with life. To others, it was death. To her, it was family, and she would protect it. In orbit, fleets gathered. In secret chambers, leaders planned. Across the galaxy, fear and anger burned. They would not stop. They would return with greater numbers, greater firepower. They would burn the Deathworld if they had to, but on the surface, the woman looked up at the stars. "They think they hunt me," she whispered. "But the hunt has only begun." The jungle roared, the storms cracked, and the Deathworld itself seemed to laugh with her. The chamber lights dimmed as the recording played again. Holograms of shattered dropships and dead soldiers flickered across the council table. Alien leaders sat in silence, their faces grim. The woman appeared in the footage, standing calm as storms tore the skies apart. Soldiers screamed. Fire burned. She never flinched. The recording ended with static. No one spoke for a long time. Finally, the scarred general rose from his seat. His armor was dented from old wars, his left eye replaced with a silver lens. His voice was low, heavy, and sharp as a blade. "I have fought humans," he said. "I have seen them survive wounds that would kill my strongest warriors. I have seen them adapt faster than any machine. One human can outlast 10 of us, sometimes more." He pointed at the frozen image of the woman. "But this one, she is something worse. She has made the Deathworld her ally. And if she ever leaves it, none of us will stand against her." The council erupted. "Exaggeration," shouted one. "Fear tactics," cried another. "She is only one human." The general slammed his fist on the table. The sound echoed like thunder. "Do not make the mistake of calling her only one human. That is the same mistake every empire has made when facing humanity. And every empire that made it fell." The chamber fell silent. Fear spread through the council like a disease. The leaders whispered in corners, their voices trembling. She must be destroyed. Not just her, the entire planet. If we let her live, we invite our own extinction. One warlord, his scales glistening with sweat, leaned forward. "If she has bonded with the planet, then we must kill the planet. Fire from orbit. Burn it until nothing remains." Others nodded. But a scholar hissed in warning. "And what if the Deathworld resists? What if it strikes back as it did against the fleets? If this world defends her, it may defend itself from us all." The words sent chills across the room. The scarred general rose again. "Bombardment may fail. Capture may fail. The truth is simple. We do not understand her. We do not understand the Deathworld. And what we do not understand, we should fear." While the galaxy argued, the woman walked the cliffs of her world. Winds howled around her, carrying ash and dust. She moved with ease, each step placed as if she had walked the same path 1,000 times. She remembered fragments of who she once was. A prisoner, a fighter, a survivor of betrayal. She remembered chains on her wrists. She remembered laughter from alien guards as they left her to burn in the crash. They thought she would die, but she had not died. She had learned, she had endured, and now she had become something they feared. The council could not wait. They needed more than recordings, more than whispers. They needed proof of what she had become. So they sent a spy. A single drone, small as an insect, descended through the storms and shadows. It carried no weapons, only eyes and ears. It crept through the jungle, recording every move, every sound. For days it followed her. It watched her drink from pools that boiled with acid. It saw her eat fruit that melted steel. It watched her walk into storms and emerge without harm. But the most terrifying recording came when she sat in silence on a ridge. Around her, beasts of the jungle gathered. Winged predators, clawed hunters, serpents with eyes like fire. They circled her like loyal hounds. She raised her hand. They bowed. The drone's feed cut out in static. When the spy's fragments reached the council, panic spread again. She commands the beasts. She is no human. She is the Deathworld's queen. But the scarred general only shook his head. She is human. That is the part you refuse to understand. Humans bend the world around them. They build homes on fire, on ice, in space, in the void. They make the impossible their ally. And this one has made the most deadly world of all her home. His words echoed in the chamber. She does not need an army. She already has one. On the Deathworld, the woman sat by a fire in her cave. She stared into the flames, her mind heavy with memory. She could leave if she wished. The ships that fell from the sky carried parts she could use. She had seen engines, controls, even working transmitters. If she worked long enough, she could build a vessel. So why had she stayed? Because this world was hers. They had cast her aside. They had wanted her dead, but the Deathworld had taken her in. It had scarred her, broken her, remade her. She was not its prisoner. She was its protector. The council argued for hours, but the general spoke one last time. You believe this is only about one woman. You are wrong. This is about what she represents. A human who can turn a Deathworld into her weapon means humans may rise again, stronger than ever. Today it is one. Tomorrow it may be many. If she survives, if she escapes, your empires will burn. He leaned forward, his silver eye glowing cold. Do not wait until it is too late. Fear her now or fear her forever. The chamber fell silent again. For the first time, not one voice argued back. On the Deathworld, lightning cracked across the night sky. The woman stood at the mouth of her cave, watching the stars beyond the storms. She knew they were watching her. She knew they would return, stronger, angrier. Her hand touched the soil. The ground pulsed back, alive. They call me human, she whispered to the wind. But soon they will call me something more. The jungle roared. The storm howled, and in the silence between thunder, it almost sounded like the Deathworld laughed with her. The stars above the Deathworld lit with fire. A fleet had come, bigger than any before. Warships dark as night blotted out the heavens. Their weapons glowed, charging, humming with death. On the ground, the woman stood still. She gazed upward, as if she had been waiting for them. Her voice was calm, steady, and chilling. They think fire can kill my world? Let them try. The first blast fell. It did not strike the ground. The storm caught it. The council had not agreed easily. Some had argued to capture her. Some had argued to leave her alone. But fear had won. And fear built the largest fleet in generations. Battleships lined in formation, carriers packed with drones, cruisers heavy with plasma bombs. Enough firepower to glass a dozen worlds. The order was given. No survivors, no remains. They would not just kill her. They would erase the entire planet. A command ship fired. The plasma beam lit the sky. A river of burning energy meant to slice the jungle in half, but as it fell, black clouds swirled and twisted. The storm rose up like a wall. The beam hit, but it bent, split, and vanished into thunder. On the bridge of the command ship, an officer's voice cracked. The storm. It's interfering. The scarred general, watching from the shadows, shook his head. Not interfering, fighting. Below, the woman raised her hand. Her fingers brushed the air and the wind howled in answer. Lightning struck the skies in patterns, not random but ordered, like blades flashing in formation. Thunder rolled not as chaos but as rhythm, steady and strong. The storm was not wild. It was hers, she whispered into the gale. Friend, and the Deathworld listened. The fleet adjusted. They fired in volleys, not single blasts. Hundreds of plasma strikes rained at once like burning rain. The jungle roared back, trees as tall as towers bent, catching fire and collapsing, but then new growth surged instantly. Roots crawling, vines twisting, smothering flames before they could spread. The earth shook. Ridges rose like fists from the ground. Rivers boiled and redirected, drowning fire in steam. The planet itself was fighting, and above it all, lightning struck warships out of the sky. On the bridge of the third cruiser, alarms screamed. Hull split open under electric fire. Entire squadrons of drones blinked out in static. "They're being guided," cried one officer. "The storms are too precise. This isn't random weather." The scarred general growled from his command post. "Do you fools see it now?" The Deathworld answers her. Every storm, every quake, every beast. She commands them all. Another ship exploded. A carrier broke in half, its burning wreck falling into the sea below. The fleet began to fracture. Fear spread faster than fire. While the skies raged, the ground shook with life. Predators poured from the jungle, scaled titans with claws like scythes, beasts with hides like steel. Winged monsters blotting out the sun. They moved with one purpose, to destroy the invaders. At the head of them stood the woman, her hair whipped by storm winds, her eyes lit by lightning. She did not command with shouts. She did not need to. They felt her will as their own. When she raised her hand, the beasts charged. The fleet fought desperately. Orbital strikes burned forests. Bombs scorched valleys. But every wound the Deathworld suffered healed. Every crater became a trap. Every fire turned into ash that fed new growth. And every ship that fell gave her more weapons. On the ground, she walked among wreckage, pulling armor from broken drones, taking blades from fallen soldiers. Piece by piece, she armed herself, not as prey, but as a warrior of her own design. When a plasma cannon lay smoking in the dirt, she touched it. The vines slithered up its frame. Slowly, impossibly, the dead weapon pulsed with new life. The planet was not only fighting, it was adapting. On the flagship, the scarred general stood alone, watching the impossible unfold. His silver eye flickered, recording everything. "She's not just human," he muttered. "She is the proof of what humanity becomes when abandoned, when forced to survive in the cruelest place imaginable." For the first time in his long life, he felt something colder than anger, something sharper than hate. He felt fear, not for his fleet, not for the Council, but for the galaxy. The battle dragged on. Warships cracked and burned. Drones fell like ash in storms. Beasts tore through landing parties before they could form ranks. The commanders of the fleet panicked. Orders screamed across comms. "Fall back! Regroup! Retreat!" The armada that had come to erase a planet began to flee from it, but the storms did not let them go easily. Lightning hunted them as they turned. Winds ripped ships apart as they broke formation. Only fragments of the fleet escaped into the void. The Deathworld had won. When the last fire faded, the woman stood at the ridge of her mountain. Her beasts gathered around her. The jungle breathed deep. The storm calmed, though lightning still flickered above like watchful eyes. She looked to the stars, where broken ships drifted in silence. "You came with fire," she whispered. "But fire is nothing here. Not against me. Not against my world." Her hand closed into a fist. "This planet is not my prison. It is my weapon." Thunder cracked in answer. Far away, in the halls of the Galactic Council, whispers turned to screams. Fleets had been lost, armies destroyed, and one truth spread faster than fire. The Deathworld was alive, and it had chosen a queen. The scarred general's words became prophecy. "If she leaves that planet," he said, his voice shaking for the first time, She will not come as one human. She will come as a storm. And when she does, no world will survive. Across the stars, soldiers spoke in hushed voices. Captains locked their doors when the stories began. Merchants sealed their ships at night. The name passed from mouth to mouth, never spoken loudly, always whispered. As if sound itself might summon her, they no longer called her human. They called her the Queen of the Deathworld. And every time her name was whispered, the listeners shivered, as if the storms of her world could somehow hear. In orbital graveyards, wreckage floated like broken bones. Shards of cruisers, the blackened shells of carriers, and twisted drones drifted forever in silence. Scavengers dared not approach. Even pirates kept away. They claimed strange signals pulsed from the wrecks, voices in static, lightning in the comms, whispers in the dark. Some swore they heard her breathing. The council tried to hide the disaster. They erased records, silenced survivors, ordered fleets not to speak. But silence could not stop fear. Silence only made it grow. Stories spread faster than light. In one version, she was taller than any soldier, her eyes glowing like storms. In another, she carried a blade of living fire, grown from the bones of the world itself. Others said she was no longer flesh at all, but storm-made flesh, lightning wearing human skin. The details changed, but the core never did. She had become the Deathworld. And the Deathworld could not be defeated. The Galactic Council met again, but their chamber no longer felt like a place of power. The shadows seemed heavier. Every flicker of the holoscreen made them flinch. She has to be destroyed, one shouted. We already tried fleets, another cried. Then we send assassins, shadows, something that cannot be stopped by storms. The scarred general said nothing. He only watched them argue, his silver eye glowing. Finally, when their shouting reached its peak, he spoke. You fools still think in weapons and soldiers. You think you can send assassins? Do you not understand yet? She is not just a woman. She is a symbol. Kill her body and the legend will live. And legends cannot be killed, but his warning was ignored. In the hidden docks of the Empire, a new weapon was prepared. Not fleets. Not armies, hunters. The silent fangs, assassins feared across the galaxy, bred in darkness, trained on poison worlds. They had killed kings, generals, even entire bloodlines. They struck unseen, leaving no trace but silence. They were unleashed upon the Deathworld, no ships of war, no signals. Only black craft that drifted without light, slipping through storms like shadows. They landed in silence, their blades coated in venom. Their armor built to resist fire and storm. They moved through the jungle like ghosts, unseen and unheard, but the world saw them. Roots shifted when they stepped. Trees leaned to watch. Eyes glowed in the underbrush. The Deathworld itself seemed to breathe heavier, as if warning them they had entered a place that did not want them. Still, they pressed on. Assassins feared nothing until they met her. She stood waiting. As if she had known all along, the assassins froze, their blades raised, their armor shining black. Her voice was calm. You came quietly, but this world is not quiet. It told me you were coming. The assassins struck. Fast, precise, deadly. But the storm moved faster. Lightning blinded their eyes. The earth opened under their feet. Vines wrapped around their limbs, crushing bones like dry twigs. She did not lift a blade. She did not need to. The Deathworld killed them for her. One remained. Wounded, bleeding, crawling through the mud. He tried to flee. He tried to send one final message to the stars. She walked beside him without hurry, her shadow long in the storm's light. Do you know why you fail? She asked softly. He gasped, coughing blood. Because you think this is my prison. You think I am trapped here. She knelt, her eyes burning with stormlight. This is not my prison. This is my crown. The earth swallowed him whole. The council received no word from their assassins. No signals, no bodies, no proof, only silence, and silence in the face of legend was worse than death. Across the galaxy, whispers spread louder. She commands storms. She drinks fire. She wears the Deathworld as armor. She cannot be killed. The name they once refused to speak now burned like fire. The Queen of the Deathworld. In his private chamber, the scarred general watched the storms of her planet through his hollow screen. He whispered to himself, "They do not understand. They think fear will break her. They do not see that fear only makes her stronger, because she is human. And humans are never more dangerous than when the galaxy fears them." His silver eye flickered as he leaned closer to the display. One day, she will leave that world. And when she does, everything will burn. On the Deathworld, the woman stood at the highest peak. Storms swirled around her, lightning dancing like blades across the sky. She looked beyond the horizon, beyond the stars. She knew they would keep coming, fleets, assassins, armies, but none of them mattered, because with every attack, she grew stronger. With every whisper of her name, her legend spread further. She was no longer just a survivor, no longer just a woman. She was the queen of the Deathworld, and the galaxy had finally learned to fear her name. The Armada came like a night that never ends. Ships filled orbit until the stars were lost. They hung in a black ring, a circle of iron and fire that swallowed light from 100 worlds they had gathered. Command flags from empires, mercenary bands, and hired legions snapped in vacuum winds. This was not a raid. This was an unmaking. On the surface, the woman stood on a cliff and watched the sky. Her face was streaked with ash. Her hands were scarred and steady. All around her, the Deathworld hummed, a low sound like a great heart. Creatures moved through the underbrush and watched her with bright, intelligent eyes. The jungle breathed with her, and the jungle knew what was coming. She had seen fleets before. She had watched them die. This was different. This time the galaxy had brought everything it could. This time they meant to end the world. High Command sat in cold rooms far away. The scarred general stood at the lead of the coalition. His voice had the gravel of 1,000 campaigns. He had won before. He had lost before. He had looked into the face of humans and never felt so small. Now he had brought a plan he hoped would finally end the threat. "Today, we break the crown," he told the assembled captains. "We break the world that protects her. We do not waste ordnance on hope. We break the bones of the Deathworld, and we take her alive or dead." A hollow silence followed his words. Men and creatures of many kinds nodded. They burned with the same fear. Their ships were full of weapons that had never been used together. They had built machines meant to scrape the planet bare. They had forged traps for storms and nets for beasts. They had carried in their hold engines more terrible than fire. On the Deathworld, the woman walked among trenches she had carved into black rock. She did not build weapons the way they did. She built paths through the jungle, shelters hidden under living roots, places where storms rolled and then forgot to strike. She had learned the timing of the sky. She had learned how the earth kept secrets. She had taught the beasts to answer to a look, and taught the trees to close like gates. Her people once had called her by a name she no longer used. The name was soft and private. She had given it up as easily as a broken chain. Now she was everything the galaxy feared. She felt the weight of that fear on her shoulders, but it did not bend her. The first salvo cracked the sky. Plasma beams lanced down like rivers of white heat. The forest screamed fire. Mountains took blows that would have shattered other worlds. For a moment it seemed their plan would work. Trees fell, rivers boiled, great beasts burned and died. Fires ran like hungry animals through the undergrowth. Then the planet answered. Storms gathered where none had been predicted. Thunder reared in time with her heartbeat. Lightning hit with a new mind. It struck engines, not trees. It struck gun emplacements, not tents. It found the thin seams of hull and ripped them open like paper. Where the fleet sent fire, the Deathworld threw back calamity. The coalition adapted. They sent shielded carriers and hardened armor. They brought drones that could work in the toxic air. They brought walkers that stamped through swamps and tore out roots like machines harvest crops. They brought weapons that sent pulses through the ground to break up root networks. They brought sound cannons to frighten the beasts. Still, the Deathworld moved. If one river was dammed, another rose. If one ridge was gutted, the earth opened somewhere else. The jungle stitched itself around wounds. The beasts turned their fury on the invaders, teaching the machines to fear teeth and claw. There were battles on every scale. Landing parties met living walls. Soldiers were pinned by vines that moved with the patience of spiders and the cruelty of plants that learned to kill. Entire brigades were swallowed when the soil opened and took them. Walkers were tipped like toys. Squadrons were eaten by storms that formed from the will of a woman standing on a distant hill. The scarred general watched from his bridge while the world burned beneath. He tasted ash and he tasted bitter fear. He ordered everything. He screamed into channels. He threw plans away and called new ones. He watched brave men and loyal captains die in ways he had never seen. "This is not warfare," he said to no one. "This is barbarism wrapped in survival." On the ground, a captain who had once laughed at stories crouched behind a shattered hull. He had seen the human who made a world obey. He had watched a creature the size of a ship climb from the jungle and swallow an entire squad. He had seen the human herself take a weapon broken and rusted and use it as her own, guided by muscles and memory and some alliance he could not understand. "She walks like she owns the place," he muttered. They said she was the Deathworld. They said the Deathworld was her. As the war dragged, both sides learned new cruelties. The coalition released chemicals designed to blunt the storm. The air carried powders that clogged leaves and smothered small life. The forest grew quiet and then screamed in new ways. The Deathworld adapted. It turned infected growth into acid blooms. It twisted plants so chemicals burned the carriers that dropped them. They brought machines that cut the thunder. Heavy fields of dampeners tried to tear storms from the sky. For a time, lightning fell scattered without aim. The fleet cheered. The scarred general tasted victory. But the silence before the storm was itself a trap. Then in a blow the fleet could not see from orbit. The ground shivered and entire shield arrays failed as roots found and gnawed through energy conduits. Ships lost contact with their troops. Ships dropped like birds shot from the sky. At the center of that noise and ruin, the woman fought in a way the invaders could not chart. She moved through the battlefield, a ghost among the living and the dead. When a bunker hummed with soldiers and armor, she would be there an hour later, with vines braided into the wreckage and weapons tuned to a different purpose. Sometimes she took a weapon and used it herself. She was not interested in trophies. She was interested in balance. She fought to keep the Deathworld human-made, to hold it as a single mind of resistance. When a carrier fell to fire and crashed into the sea, she walked along the wreck hours later. Black fuel slicked her boots. The dead were in cages and crumpled metal. She knelt, touched a fallen pilot's hand, and left a small thing in his palm, a seed. It would burn somewhere and grow where no growth should be, and the pilot's name would be on the wind after long days. War changed her as it changed everything. She grew sharp where she had been soft. She learned to kill with the same clarity she had used to feed herself from the world. She learned to take the instruments of the enemy and make them part of the forest. She became a living seam between the iron of ships and the green of leaves. Not all were taken by the planet. Some units adapted. They learned to move like thieves and hide like shadows. They mapped the glands that let trees spit poison and found ways to block them. They found pockets of soil that did not answer her, cold pockets, and dug there. They set traps. They used light to blind beasts and sit inside the dark like worms. This small band of survivors struck hard. They came close to her vaults. They burned a grove that seemed to tremble in sorrow. They wounded her beasts and burned their young. The jungle flinched. For the first time in many years, the woman felt a real sharp pain. When she found the place, its air smelled like char and burned hair. She pressed her hands into the burnt earth until her palms bled. She gathered the wounded creatures and pressed their broken bones into the soil, as if sewing a new wound closed with her own blood. The beasts lived for a while. The beast who had been their leader crawled to her and licked her wounds like a dog. The pain changed her. It taught her rage. It hardened her resolve. The Deathworld answered her with a sound like a cry and a promise. The scarred general learned something in the last days. He had hoped to break her like he had broken other threats. He had hoped the machine he commanded could beat the old wild. Instead, he found himself speaking into a calm that no longer felt his own. His commands felt small. His plans were eaten. One morning he watched from his command portal as the last of his cruisers fell. He turned to his aides, his voice small for the first time. "We have made a grave. We will be remembered as men who tried to bury a world. But graves rot. Roots take them. We are the fallen ones." He saw in that moment the truth he had tried to deny. The woman was human. That human had taught a world to fight like a sword. She had taught the Deathworld to use the galaxy's own violence as a mirror. The more the galaxy tried to force herself into a corner, the more creative she became. The more creative she became, the more dangerous she was. As the last of the regular fleet slipped away, something else moved. Not retreat, not surrender. A small fleet pushed through the fog and landed far from the war. They were not the coalition he had led. They were smaller, precise, carrying a single gift of ruin. They set up engines that sang a low note and pulled at the ground. They bore devices that the old scholars called anchors, machines that could isolate 100 miles of planet and cut it from the rest. They could detach a region of the Deathworld and make it silent. They hoped to trap her inside and then burn that small body until ashes remained. The woman felt the anchor come like a slow ice. She felt the world inside that circle grit its teeth. For days the anchor pressed, pulling at the streams and the roots, at the nervous system she had sensed for years. It did not kill. It made the Deathworld be quiet. She stood in the zone as the machine hummed and felt the world shrink its voice. The air cooled, insects slowed, even the beating of the beasts grew faint. She placed her hand on the anchor and felt nothing. It was a thing without soul. She could have run. She could have attacked that small fleet. Instead, she did what she had learned to do over seasons and storms. She sat, she listened. She let the silence show her a new path. On the other side of the anchor, the planet threshed and wept. The Deathworld gave up a sound that went to the roots. It sent confusion. It sent a dream into the anchor's mind. In that dream, the anchor saw a human child and a ruined ship and hands that would not be let go. The anchor pulsed and then it died. The machines were clever, but they were not alive. When the anchor failed, the sudden return of sound hit like a wave. The jungle roared, and the beasts came down from the trees, and the sky filled with lightning that wanted blood. The fleet nearby did not stand. It fled into the dark with crackling, calamitous loss. The war ended, not with a single victory, but with exhaustion. The coalition limped away. Ships left damaged and bleeding. Some captains chose shame and decided never to speak of the thing again. Others carried messages of warning. On the cliff, the woman watched the final wrecks fall out of orbit. The sky filled with the slow, painful floats of burned metal. She felt the cost. The Deathworld had taken and learned a new hunger for survival. Lives had been lost on both sides, more than she could count. The beasts had been broken and mended. The trees had new scars. The rivers had new graves. She looked at the stars and did not feel triumph. She felt the echo of war in her chest. She had protected her home. She had used the world to stop a machine that wanted to wipe it. She had changed into something harder. The scarred general watched the retreat from a command they had emptied of people. He felt defeat like a stone in his throat. He had won wars and had held treaties and had burned whole cities. This war left him empty. He sent a message on all secure channels, a simple warning drawn from the smoke and the ash. It was not a report of victory. It was not full of claims. It was a single line. "Do not make her wrath your lesson," he said. "Do not make her your enemy unless you are prepared to lose what you love." That warning traveled through the galaxy like a spark. On the Deathworld, the woman knelt where the soil had been trampled and placed seeds into the ground. She spoke softly to the beasts, and she sang a song that had no name. The jungle listened and took the seeds close. It would remember the burns for years. It would remember the names of those lost and hide those memories in bark and root. At the edge of her hearing, she felt a pull. She looked up and saw a small glint of movement in the void where a ship had once floated. It was not coalition. It was small and fast. It carried a single signal, and it carried a human face on its screen. The galaxy had not finished with her. She knew that. The scarred general's message would ring in ears and hearts and come back in new shapes. Traders would whisper. Mercenaries would scheme. Empires would plot. She touched the soil one more time and felt it answer. "Let them come," she said to the world and to the stars. "Let them come and learn what a world will do to keep its own." The Deathworld roared its agreement like a drum of thunder. The last war had ended. A new war would come. The woman stood, and the rain began to fall. The galaxy sent everything, every ship, every weapon, every soldier who could still carry a gun, from the dark edges of empire, from hidden worlds of science, from prisons where monsters were chained. They gathered all into one armada, a fleet so large it blotted out the stars, its light brighter than suns, its weapons meant to kill not one planet, but a god. The council declared, "This ends now." No more whispers, no more fear. The Deathworld must die, and with it the woman they call Queen. The fleet lit its engines. The final war had begun. When they arrived, the Deathworld itself trembled. The sky burned with thousands of warships, each one armed with weapons forbidden for centuries. They fired all at once, a rain of fire that shattered mountains, boiled oceans, and cracked continents. The planet screamed. Storms howled. Lightning struck the heavens with such fury that ships burst into flame before a single shot reached the ground. But still, the armada pressed on. At the heart of the burning world, she stood, the storms wrapped around her like a cloak. Fire licked her skin, but it did not burn. The Deathworld bled, but it did not break. She looked at the sky, at the endless fleet above, and whispered, "If the galaxy wants my death, then it will learn what my life truly means." Lightning struck her body. Instead of destroying her, it lifted her. The storms themselves carried her upward, raising her into the fire-filled sky. She did not ride a ship. She did not need one. The Deathworld had made her its weapon. When she rose into the void, the fleet opened fire. Beams brighter than suns, warheads meant to shatter worlds, but every shot bent. Every blast turned. The storm followed her, wrapping her in a shield of fury. She reached the first cruiser with nothing but her hands. Lightning ripped through its hull, tearing it apart like paper. She leapt to the next, tearing open armor with the force of the storm. Ship by ship, the armada broke, but the fleet was endless. For every vessel that fell, 10 more closed in. Still she did not stop. Deep within the flagship, the Council's final creation was armed. Not a bomb, not a beam, a void engine. A weapon that tore holes in reality itself, collapsing everything into nothing. "Fire it," the Council commanded. "If the galaxy must burn with her, then so be it. Better ashes than fear." The weapon charged, the fabric of space screaming as the void bent. She felt it before they fired. A tear in existence. A wound that would not only kill her, but consume her world, her storms, and perhaps the stars beyond. For the first time, her face hardened, not with rage, but with sorrow. She had become more than herself. She was her world, her storms, her legend. If she died here, the Deathworld died with her, but humanity had taught her something else. Legends do not end with death. They end with choice. She rose higher, lightning blazing from her body like suns. She hurled herself into the path of the void engine. Her storm clashed with the wound in space. The fleet shook. Stars flickered. Reality itself cracked. For a heartbeat, the galaxy was blind. When the light cleared, the armada was gone. The flagship was dust. The void engine had collapsed on itself, and she was no longer on her world. Whispers spread like wildfire. She leapt into the void. She walks where no world can follow. She is gone, but not dead. On her Deathworld, the storms still raged, but they were gentler now, almost protective. The animals no longer hunted each other as fiercely. The roots grew stronger, the skies clearer. It was as if she had left her spirit behind to guard it. The scarred general sat alone, his silver eye glowing in the dark. He listened to the rumors. Some said she had become a star. Others claimed she wandered the void, waiting for the day she would return. He whispered softly, "She was human, and the galaxy has never feared anything more than a human who refuses to die." He raised a glass to the stars, to the queen of the Deathworld, and across the endless dark, in the silence between suns, a storm flickered, lightning danced where no world existed, a shadow moved within it. The galaxy would never be the same, because the queen of the Deathworld was not gone. She was waiting.